Thank you so much for joining us here at the very first Vention Unplugged event in New York. We already had one in Berlin and in London, and this time is the first here in New York. I'm super happy that you all joined us and that we can spend the night here together with this awesome panel. My name is Paul Lunow. I'm the CTO of Digital Solutions at Vention. I am from Berlin in Germany. I had the honor to moderate this event over there also, and they asked me to do it here too. So I can't be more happy to be here and spend the evening with you. Let me also introduce you very briefly to Vention. We are an engineering powerhouse, and we headlined our services with engineering peace of mind. So whenever something is not working, not fast enough, not as expected, we are here to help. We have already 20 years of experiences in the market, and we have 3,000 engineers across Eastern Europe and Central Asia. I joined Vention like 7 months ago, and it was for me one of the main reasons that our founder is also an engineer. So the engineering DNA is really inside this company, and this is something I really appreciate and really love, and now I'm so happy to be a part of it. And you know that also engineering is not only sitting alone in front of your computer, it is also exchange and network and get to know other people and spend evenings together. And that's why I'm so happy that we have this Vention Unplugged event here to build this community and to get in exchange with all of you. And to kick that off, we have this awesome panel here. I'm happy to introduce to you, first of all, Minerva. She is the first CTO of the City of New York, a 4-time US patent holder, co-founder of Grasshopper Bank, and a leader in AI innovation, currently serving as advisor in residence at the EY Center of Executive Leadership. Please give a warm applause, Minerva. Next one left to me is Buka. She leads enterprise-wide AI and automation at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, bringing deep experience deploying advanced AI and machine learning across healthcare, finance, and technology from roles at BlackRock, Haptic, and Relays Geo. Welcome, Buka. And we have Frank with us. He is a cybersecurity and AI governance executive with 25 years of experience specializing in responsible AI, enterprise risk, and regulatory alignment while advising boards on AI risk management and oversight. Welcome, Frank. Thank you. So we have a lot of knowledge here, and I hope I have some good questions. Let us go into the topic. The first one, and this is also something I am hearing in more or less all of my conversations. How do we measure it, right? We want to bring KPIs. And I am super curious to hear from you and from your experiences. What did you actually measure when you shipped your first major AI system? And what should you have measured instead?
Minerva, you go for it.
Minerva, yeah, maybe that is your question.
You know, I've been part of many large digital transformations, business transformations, and it's so important at the very beginning. You know, the title of this talk: what are you optimizing for? It isn't necessarily, more clicks. Maybe it's more conversions, right? So, if you're automating a process, I think it's important to have KPIs that really look at the outcomes, right? Completed applications or completed sales, as well as quality. So many folks are using AI now to replace portions of their software development process. And that's great, as long as you're not doing the wrong things faster and at greater scale, right? And so, really understand upfront what you're measuring. So good KPIs, of course, quality, in addition to, speed of deployment. But even in a call center situation, for example, there was one where you could look at average hold time as, a metric, but you may have a shorter hold time, be more efficient going through calls, but your resolution numbers may go down. Right. So again, though it's important what you measure what you care about.
And getting to these numbers is sometimes super difficult, right? Because every stakeholder have different thoughts and different ideas what to measure. And also you always have the issue that you maybe then optimize for the wrong thing. Buka, what is your experiences?
Yes. So I think because currently we're at this intersection of traditional AI ML versus now agentic, things are changing, right? Because we were used to measuring things in a traditional way before, and we had these standard KPIs. However, now we should be able to pivot and really look at our KPIs. They're still the same, obviously, but time to value is slightly different, I would say, because this is such an unknown that we don't know what we don't know. And so while if you go on, LinkedIn or elsewhere, or listening to podcasts and they say, oh, you'll spin up something in 24 hours. While you do that, perfect, right? We all spin up our own little claw, agents or open claws or whatever. But it's so different on the enterprise side and depending on how regulated you are. So currently, while we still have those KPIs, I think that's this intersection where we're figuring out, okay, what is the time to value? Actually, is it 24 hours? No, we don't want that, right? That's not safe. But is it 18 months? No, it has to be much, much shorter, right? Now, I think if you're spinning up a use case, even on enterprise side, and it's taking you more than 6 months, your KPIs are really off.
So time to value is a very important thing to measure. What is your perspective, Frank?
So I'm from the cybersecurity side, and where we see the biggest impact of AI is within security operations. You're dealing with teams that are just overloaded with events and alerts all day long. And the challenge that a lot of the teams are running into is that because they have so much overload of these events, they're missing the big ones. And so there's been a lot of debate around, well, first off, every vendor that's out there, right after AI came out, they all said that they had AI, which was really interesting when I went to the shows. And I'm like, it's the same product from last year. Like, yeah, but it's got AI now. I'm like, okay. But the really big thing for the vendors that actually do have AI, specifically around your SOAR capabilities as well as your SIM capabilities, made a world of difference in the operations side, because now we're not replacing analysts. We're using AI to do that large scale detection of events, of alerts, of pattern recognition that a human just can't do. The human cannot do millions of patterns and be able to recognize it in a matter of minutes. We're just not wired for that. And so ultimately AI gives us those capabilities, and then it allowed me to take those analysts and put them on much more meaningful work. So we solved two problems. Number one, we got much faster mean time to detection. And then we were able to take that expertise, the analysts who came in, which is such a deep background in cyber, to now take all of that collective data and make a risk-based decision about what's going on in our environment. Because we can't just trust AI to do the risk decision as well. AI can do all the data collection, but we need that human to evaluate where that risk is. And now the analysts are doing much more exciting work, which means the turnover is significantly less and the detection is a lot faster.
Oh, yeah.
When you are looking into a new project, right? Or let's say you are operating already a project, and then you maybe come to the team and asking for the KPIs, and they say, yeah, we thought about it, but we're still not there yet. We need to bring something to the table. Is there any non-negotiable KPI connected to AI implementation we bring to the table? Or
I think the KPIs are predominantly all the same, but the added KPIs definitely are risk, right? We need to make sure that we're deploying whatever we're practicing is per, the security there's zero margin of error, right? So, and those vulnerabilities that are exposed in your large language models, or even how your network security is set up, everything needs to be accounted for. So right now, what you have same KPIs plus nuance, which we're uncovering now more and more and more, right? And so it's becoming more challenging. But I don't think there is any negotiation where we say, okay, fine, maybe time to deliver it, but otherwise, what?
You know, I'm going to say something maybe a little weird here, but I think, you know, you want to think about what costs are you measuring? So there have been some implementation that turns out that they did not do token optimization, and they ended up spending way more money than they thought on the AI than the people. And so, you know, to keep in mind that if part of your driver is cost efficiency, that to keep in mind the cost of the AI itself as well.
I actually love where she is going. So how many people here were part of the cloud revolution when it first started, right? Everyone ran the cloud and like, it's going to solve everything. It's going to cut so much cost. There's zero complexity. Let's shut that all of our data scientists, fire all the technical people, and it's going to be amazing. And then 3 years went by and they said, oh my goodness, cloud is costing us more than we ever thought. None of our applications are cloud enabled. I guess we have to go back to a hybrid model, but all the people we let go with all the institutional knowledge, they all found other jobs. So now what are we going to do? So we actually went backwards as an industry because we overreacted. And I see the same thing happening with AI, just at a much more accelerated rate. So we're not learning from the mistakes of the past. In fact, I think as just sort of human culture, we never learn from the mistakes of the past. We just keep making the same mistakes over and over. I do think we're going to invest so much in AI. We're going to realize that there are components of it that are really helpful, but it's not going to solve everything. And we're going to have to pivot and go back. But also to your point, actually, one of the things that I've done in a couple of financial institutions is stood up an AI committee where when the business says they want to do something with AI, they need to come fully prepared and they need to be able to explain what is the benefit, what is the impact to the organization, what's the risk. And a lot of times in the early days of business lines coming to the committee, they weren't ready. And we said, you know, we understand the excitement. I said, but the vendor's going to solve all the problems for us. The vendor's going to tell you anything to get the sales, right? But does it really work? And what's the impact that it's going to bring to the business? And what's the impact when it goes wrong? And a lot of times they weren't ready to answer those questions. And we said, sorry, as a committee, we can't approve this yet.
So let us talk a little bit more about how can we avoid doing the same mistakes again. Right? I mean, we see that clearly, but in our day-to-day work, we are overwhelmed with all the small fires everywhere. So what is your strategic perspective to avoid that mistake?
So I always tell everyone absolutely that AI is not a solution for everything, right? What is your problem? Tell me what's your problem, and then I'll figure out whether it's automation, it's AI, and maybe I cannot help you. Maybe it's just a business process, right? You need to clean up your workflows, or it's just a bad design decision, whatever it is. And I think we are underestimating value and of automation in general. I'm a big fan of automation because people can just say, oh, AI can do it. But it's not really AI. It's a pure automation. You have TensorFlows, you have, you know, whatever you're doing, you have to strip it down, remove all the fancy language and fancy layers, and then see, is this maybe just an Ansible job? Right? Maybe that's all it's needed.
It's the hammer and nail problem, right? You know, everything's a nail if all I have is a hammer. And so that's not always the right answer. And, you know, kind of tying together the previous question, it really is quality, not quantity. You know, there was a recent article, you know, about a company that says we have 23,000 agents deployed, you know. I was like, okay, so, you know, it's probably much more important to say, you know, we've reduced processing time. So my patents are an intelligent workflow, the early agentic kind of design, wrote them 20 years ago. And the main thing, the main part of that was, it was a time when there was 3 million home loans being processed per day with paper. And so this created the ability to really not just understand and automate the process that you have, but actually improve it, right? Because some things you do because they were always done that way. So you also want to look at improving the process before you automate it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important lesson, even from cloud, because one of the sayings back then was lift and shift.
Oh, yes.
Or take my mess for less or whatever.
So I love that.
We can learn from that.
Clearly, we're not learning from that.
We're not. We're probably going to talk about this a little bit later, but putting the guardrails around AI is really important. And from a cybersecurity standpoint, a lot of people would think of, a CISO saying, no, you can't do this. I'm a huge believer in AI. I've been using it ever since it really came mainstream. Was working with products that were using AI before AI became a thing. And it's ultimately around building out the guardrails to say, here's what acceptable use looks like, and here's where unacceptable use looks like. And it's starting, it's a simple thing, but it's starting with the policy and it's starting with the training and educating the staff and management. This is what you should be able to do with AI. That's advantageous for the company. And this is where you need to be careful. And it's simple to us a lot of times, but it's been surprising a lot of times when I've spoken with business lines that are just brilliant. But when you talk to them about data classification and that toxic combination of interacting with highly confidential or personally identifiable information and a public Gen AI bot, that toxic combination that goes along with it, they're like, oh, we didn't know that we couldn't do that. And so it's really a very big paradigm shift, because I explained it to them. I said, well, if you send a confidential document via email to the wrong person, one person knows about it. That shouldn't. If you take that same confidential document and you upload it into a large language model, everyone in the world has the capability of finding that. And when you explain it that way, they're like, oh my goodness, we didn't understand that. So it's the education around LLMs that it's more than just an acronym. It's really a thing, and go from there.
Definitely the education thing is super important, but I see also a lot of engineers that are overwhelmed with all the mandatory training, and you had already your 10 hours day, and then you should do the 2 hours of training to learn stuff. So how do we make sure to track this kind of learning and this kind of mind shift without being able to put that into a KPI we can take a look at?
But I don't think that we do have those trainings, right? I think whatever you're underlining, it's so new and fresh. There's no institutional training. There's general cybersecurity training, right? Like don't drop your USB stick in the parking lot and pick it up, and then, right? It's a classic one. But I think whatever is happening right now with things are changing so rapidly. Every day, every week, we have something new. And so those trainings are not being set up yet. It's more about institutions or departments taking an initiative to say, okay, everyone, open cloud, don't give your enterprise credentials. Right?
Don't delete my emails.
Right. But all of this is so fresh that it's almost the burden is falling on all of us as practitioners. Because if we do something wrong, we might get caught, might not, because institutions may not be able to catch it also, right? So all of this is very new to us, to all of us. And I don't even know. I think engineers are also trying, because there's also institutional pressure to adopt AI.
Yeah, from a lot of stakeholders.
Yeah.
And then we are saying, okay, let's switch around the security guys and let's make a prototype first. Minerva, you saw so many technology shifts in your career. What is your take on this massive moving part we are looking at the moment?
Yeah, thank you for noting my age. I am the grandmother of AI. I started my first AI company in 1985, so before you people were born. And back then it was a decision support system, and that was really key. It wasn't just a decisioning system. It wasn't created to be autonomous, but it took a lot of the complex calculations, and instead of a language model, it produced graphs that, the senior executive could interpret and make decisions based on those graphs. Now, fast forward to the patterns and, agentic and workflow. That again was really around enabling and enhancing. But the difference now and machine learning, right? It's not like anybody in your company could just sit at their computer and start using XGBoost to do their work. But I think the difference now with this wave of AI is the consumerization of it, that anyone can go to a chatbot and quote unquote for free, and start using it. And so that's where the education is very important. It was like the early days of, on the internet or instant messaging. We have to kind of, or social media, right? Especially in regulated industries, you couldn't just put up, mybank.com, and say I'm a bank, right? Just because it was on the web. And so, so I think why this is so pressing and urgent now, one, the lessons from social media, and two, really think carefully about, because it is accessible to everyone, how to keep the focus on optimizing for the human. Now, it's a great individual productivity tool. You can even help you write. It's like spell check, spell check, as last I checked, isn't evil. But the chatbots can be misused or misinterpreted. And I'll close with one thing about human agency. When anybody remember when the first MapQuest came out?
Oh, wow.
So you can get directions, but you have to print them out and then read them in your car. And the early days gave you the wrong directions, right? But people could see in front of them that that's a river, but they would make a left turn anyway. Because, MapQuest told them to make a left right there. And so, and now the same is applicable with autonomous cars, which is going to be really interesting. I don't know if you saw the story that just drove right through a railroad crossing, one of the Teslas. So, so the human agency component is going to be important. And probably the number one thing I would say in terms of AI literacy is how to retain human agency and optimize for human benefit.
Yeah, definitely. Because it is not only the printed out maps, it's also the instruction from Google Maps that leads people into very miserable situations.
And grandma said so.
The human cost of AI is definitely real, right? We are losing more and more of our abilities because we always have this tool that pretends to be able to do everything. So that is hard to track, and that will never make it into a report. So how do we avoid that human skills in our teams? So what do we need to set as a leader to, we need to educate the people, don't upload private documents. That's one thing. But what is your approach in making sure that your team still stays capable and knowable and is inside their jobs?
Wow, I can take that. So I think there are multiple facets there, right? Can you hear me?
3 inches.
Three.
Right here.
So it really depends on, so there are multiple layers. If you're talking about agentic AI, that's a totally different ballgame, because what I'm seeing now is that we're all talking about, we're going to upskill everyone. It is really difficult to upskill your traditional engineer into an agentic engineer, if you ask me. I don't know, maybe you guys all had And the skills that are emerging, right, it's just different, right? You need to have this nuance and this finesse of the English language, right? With prompting, instructions, descriptions, referring, like, then of course you're putting like functions and everything, but it's different. Then you're talking about automation. Now, if we're talking about upskilling people through automation, that's quite, you can do quite a lot of it because, you can write your, Claude code and whatever it is. But you need to look at each segment individually. And that's when you make the most, I would say, fruitful decisions and roadmaps how to upskill your current teams.
And do you have any KPIs or numbers? How do you tackle that?
Oh, is it you or me?
I don't know who is it.
Oh, I don't know. I'm still figuring out. Yeah. I'm still in the process.
Anything to add?
I think the question you asked in regards to, are we becoming over-reliant on AI? I was talking with a guest here earlier on where the next generation, we're going to really question how much practical working knowledge do they really have. They're coming out of university, which is great, but they've been using so much digital real estate or leveraging AI that do they really have the technical expertise? Do they really have the knowledge, the working knowledge, the experience to do what's actually needed? And I get it. We want to be able to go as fast as possible. But what happens when AI stops?
Yeah. Or get more expenses.
I would hire those kids more to build my AI agents than trying to teach a traditional engineer who's not understanding really agentic, right? So I was actually thinking about it. Everyone was talking about, and sorry to interrupt.
No.
Everyone was talking about these kids are not getting hired, but these kids are building AI agents better than any of us because this is what they do. So then what we're doing is I'm most likely as an executive, so we try to upskill, and myself included, right? I try to teach myself how to build agents. And it's different mindset. Right. But I bet if I give it to, 22-year-old, this is all he knows. Right. So I don't know.
That's a great point.
So I think some successes I've seen, large enterprises, right, have built essentially secure internal sandboxes for training. And, certainly where I am now, they have a ton of internal training. They measure adoption, but there's also actual infrastructure that's kind of a safe place to play and build your own agents. And then they get deleted, right? Because you don't want they get orphaned, right? If you leave the company, what happens? So, kind of learning with the company, I think is really helpful. The other, which is a really important use case, is capturing the knowledge of those mid-level engineers because they have all the context in their head. They may not know how to build an agent like, the 20-somethings, but they actually know why you would want and what it should do.
Absolutely.
So, and certainly on the teams that are using, platforms for specifically for SDLC, for example, the top performers are the people that have figured out they're the Claude whisperer. They're the they're the ones who've figured out how to get the tools do what needs to be done, and that requires more than just knowing how the tool works. It's actually having that understanding and may I say some architectural knowledge and business knowledge is going to be key. In generative images, there's, some ad tech now where, all the ads that you're going to see on all the social media will be generated by AI. What we're finding, though, is it becomes even more important, the taste of the human, right? Because, you got to fight the slop somewhere. And so certain human attributes are going to be even more valuable because of AI.
So as tech leaders, we are sitting as usual in a very difficult situation, right? And it is even more difficult as always because the whole industry is changing and we need to still make the decisions, right? Do we hire still junior engineers? Do we rely on their abilities to code agents? Can you talk a little bit about your decision frameworks? As a seasoned tech leader, how do you tackle these decisions when everything is unclear and everything is changing more or less daily?
Yeah. Yes, we are sitting and learning and figuring out and pivoting all the time. And as frustrating as it is, that's just the way it is. It's the nature of the beast. So what I would suggest is if you have younger, whether they're engineers or just quality check, or they just do grunt work of manual analysis, whatever it is, or they're the ones building your agents, for example, or even a simple automation. I think it's really important that us as, more mid-level or whoever the SMEs are, to not assume that you sitting down with an engineer, only one session is enough. It's not, right? They need to have institutional knowledge. Then they need to understand why this works, why you're doing it, how this department works. And a lot of times I end up repeating myself, just giving you greater context. And it's almost like a refresher.
Mhm.
I always end up giving refresher. Remember this use case? This is because of this, right? And I think so long as we are patient and we say, okay, I'm sitting down and I'm learning something from them and they're learning something from me.
Mhm.
And it has to be a collaboration of not just sitting down and getting frustrated after the third sit down that, oh, you still could not remember. Or just create a knowledge article, right? And then you feed into
Yeah.
training.
Can you make that maybe a little bit more concrete about a prototype you built and that was failing or not reaching production?
Oh, I have many examples.
Which is the best one?
Oh, okay. Oh, you put me on the spot now. I don't know which one to choose from. So yeah, we can look at, so let's look at one of the agents.
Mhm.
So engineer puts, prompt description and then attaches knowledge base article. Prompt says, do this, and then important part here is that we were using GPT-4 and then we moved to GPT-5. And if any of you know, that's quite of a shift, right? And so we had to redo all our prompts, we had to redo all of our descriptions, and it was very frustrating. And then we forgot to update something in the KB article, or they put a double prompt, and it was just this nuance, right? Where, okay, then agent really got confused,
Mhm.
right? Because then he said, do this, and then in the KB article says, don't do it, right? And then he got confused and it started making up its own reality, right? So these are the things, yes, I could have gotten really annoyed, right? But I said, no, it's okay. We'll figure it out because I'm also figuring it out. So there are so many nuances like this where it's new and we just have to go through it.
So you need to say, you are saying we need to build an environment where we can experiment and where we need to redo all these experiments with every new model release.
Well, I hope not. I maybe, yes, right, yeah, right, yes. Yes, it's a learning curve for all of us.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a new normal, maybe at least for the next year or so, and then maybe we'll have some supermodel. Then I don't know. Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Yeah, until this happens, we definitely need to make our work here. And Frank, maybe you have a perspective from the security standpoint about prototypes that never reach production.
There's been a number of products we've implemented that just did not live up to the hype. And a lot of it came down to being able to detect faster, being able to correlate data much more quickly. And we found that the amount of training that went into the tool was actually more work than the analyst just actually doing the work. So sometimes there's that that breaking point where you have to say, this is just not working. And a lot of the companies I worked for, we used to use the terminology fail fast. If it's not working, just get out of it. Right. And I think we need to really embrace that with AI because we're moving at a breakneck speed. And we need to make sure that if it's just not working, it's not working and move on to the next solution. I think the challenge we ran into was we're trying to move at speed and we're talking to executive management and we're saying, this is the product. This is going to solve it for us. And then even after testing, it's not living up to what we thought it would do.
Mm-hmm.
And now we go back to management saying, yeah, we told you that product was great. Now this one is better. And after a while, you start to lose that credibility. So you have to be really careful on, which products, which models you're going to use. And then to Buka's point, what do you do when model drift happens?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really big problem. When everything around you changes, but the model still only knows what the model knows.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to retrain it all. So it's almost like we have to retrain our staff just to babysit the AI engines. And that's a challenge in itself.
But it's not going away.
No.
Please don't think that we're going to go back and not have those. No, we have to figure this out. We must.
We drank the Kool-Aid. Now we got to deal with it.
Genie's out of the box. Genie's out of the box.
I would agree. I think, LLMs are a tool, right? There are others and there will be more tools. There are more tools, post-transformer architecture being built and specified now. And so, the only certainty is uncertainty. And if you build within that context, you start with prototyping, you understand what went wrong, you move on from that. But you also want to make sure that you don't over-index on one solution versus another, knowing that things are going to change. There's also, so you can do a risk-based assessment. You can say, hey, it's easy enough to make a mistake here, but maybe not on the, quarterly report, and so that's why folks who have started experimenting, and I've talked to a number of companies, they were like PE firms and, brokerages, they said, the engineering team built this great tool, but we have no idea who's supposed to approve it for production and who's responsible, right? And so, so it just sits there in the sandbox, and that's okay. Strong communication with your business, incorporating product managers and whoever your business customers are in that process of exploration. Don't overpromise and underdeliver. I know that's we do for a living, but I think those are some of the things that's going to be really key as the models evolve. I know people are already thinking about multimodal options and neurosymbolic options where if your problem is probabilistic, and it's okay to say 2 + 2 is probably 4. And there's a lot of reasons, like, maybe that a diagnosis, it might be A or B. But then when you're going to go into surgery, you need to know that 2 + 2 is definitely 4, right? It's the left arm and not the right arm, like that kind of thing. And so kind of dividing up what you want to do to make sure that you're solving the right problem, I think will help.
So all the good engineering practices we are doing already since decades, we just need to apply them to the new circumstances.
Yeah.
So everything is changing. No easy answers at all. I thought we will get some super easy things here. Let me close that with one question to each of you. What's one thing humans will always do better than AI?
Humor, I think. Although I can be challenged. Well, I don't know. I think that ultimately with this whole AI hype and reality of us living with it, ultimately we will all hopefully crave more human connections. And so I was reading, I'm sorry, this is probably a long answer, but I was listening quite a lot and reading about new grads are trying to find jobs. and all they're interacting are with AI bots.
Wow.
And it breaks my heart, right? Because that's not how I got my first job, right? And so in a way, it's our responsibility because we are the ones spinning up those AI bots for HR departments to, right? We are the ones, right? We're the creators. So, yeah, I think that human AI will do a lot, but hopefully will not take what we have, that special connection of human connection. And so, maybe let's design AI that still has its own place, and we as humans have our own spot.
How do I bring this one back to the humor in the beginning? That was so nice.
Humor doesn't podcast.
Minerva.
Well, human values are always going to be best done by humans. And, one of the really, if you want a quick takeaway, build the governance into the design and not as a gate at the end. Okay. So start with your own, trust your own human values, ethical, whatever you want to call them, safety, security, build them in the beginning. Because in all my years, it's always been way more expensive to do it at the end. And you might not even succeed. And then there's no kill pill and we're all dead. So, so I think that's the responsibility of all of the people in this room. It's up to you to define the human values in our AI systems.
I think two things that I don't think AI can do rather well, and it may get to this point, but I think as the operations get more complex, it's still going to be behind, and that is situational awareness and risk management. I think we can leverage AI to do a lot of the quick and dirty work, but I think at the end of the day, the human still needs to make that decision. And if we let AI make all the decisions, we're going to wind up in a place that we don't want to be. And we got to be really careful about that.
Yeah, very true. I want to add one thing human or the AI will never do is doing this recoupling, fixing this thing. But that is a different topic. So thank you so much for joining this panel. Please give a warm applause to our panelists.